Now, of the 11 statues in Parliament Square in London, not one is of a woman. There's Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Churchill and Disraeli. But now a petition calling for a statue of a suffragette to join the ranks has gained more than 68,000 signatures. So is it time to have such a statue in Parliament Square? Well, joining me now to discuss, the comedian Kate Smurthwaite and the writer Charlotte Gill. Thank you both for joining us, ladies. To you first, Kate, why should there be a suffragette represented in Parliament Square? What's the case for?
Well, I mean, it's fairly straightforward, really. The right for half of the population to vote, to be involved in the political process in our country is huge. I mean, we're looking at 100 years since this was the big issue in British politics. And there are a huge number of women who, quite literally put their lives on the line in some cases, and indeed in one case very memorably lost her life. There are women who gave up their whole lives campaigning for this. And it's such a huge and important thing for 52% of us in this country. That's the reason why we get to be involved in politics. And I sort of don't think it's really too much to ask that we should commemorate this by putting a statue in Parliament Square. It's interesting because you mention some of the more notable guys who have statues in Parliament Square. There are some guys there. George Canning, he was Prime Minister for what, 4 whole months? He's sort of almost there as a statue because of what he might have done rather than what he actually did. I think there's a good argument for saying, we've got loads of guys there. Let's make sure the message that women are as entitled to be a part of our political discourse as men. Let's make sure that we genuinely communicate that. And one really obvious and clear way of doing that is that when you go to visit Parliament, you don't walk past 11 men. You walk past at least one woman. I'm not even asking for half the statues, although I'd quite like that. I'm asking for one.
OK, Charlotte, it seems a pretty clear case, doesn't it? Would it be too much to ask for just one?
Well, I think the whole problem with this campaign is it really shows the rise of arbitrary feminism. In other words, looking for problems that don't really exist, looking for things to do when women, real feminists, should be focusing on real problems, things like gender-based violence, for instance. The fact of the matter is that a week ago, no one cared that there wasn't a statue of a woman on Parliament Square. And it took Caroline Criado-Perez, who's running this campaign, to go for a jog with her dog and go, oh, that's strange, there's not a woman. So I want to know why all the fuss now? For many of us, obviously Parliament Square is a very important part of London and the UK, but it's not where we're hanging out. It's generally full of politicians and tourists, and people walking around that area aren't really thinking about gender equality. Mostly, how do I get to Hamleys?
Kate, feminists should be concentrating on bigger and better things.
Well, there's two things there. Firstly, the idea that people who are thinking about politics won't be thinking about gender equality. Well, that's kind of the problem, isn't it? I want people who think about politics to think about gender equality because there's some of those other issues that Caroline mentions. I would like to get those further up the list. I would like to have those addressed and I'd like to have those talked about. And I think that if we're not thinking about gender equality when we think about politics, then that is the root of the problem. But also, I mean, to be quite frank with you, the start of what was said there about feminists need to concentrate on other things. Like that, to me, that's kind of the most stupid thing I've heard all day. I didn't get a phone call this morning that said, what would you like to talk about on the news today? And if I had had such a phone call, I would have said we need to let in 3,000 unaccompanied child refugees. I would have said we need to stop selling off the NHS. I would have said we need to do something about the education system and make sure that it doesn't end up being run by carpet companies. I would have given you a great big list of things. And the idea of sitting there and going, well, you're focusing on the wrong things, quite the contrary. Like many feminists around the country, I'm campaigning on a huge number of issues that affect real people's lives. And I think that, the fact that us feminists are not taken seriously enough by Parliament, why is that? What's going on? Why aren't the politicians listening more to campaigners like me? And well, one of the reasons is because women's voices are not taken seriously. And what's driving that? Well, one of the things driving that is that when we talk about politics, your other guest immediately says, that's got nothing to do with gender equality. Well, it has. It's got everything to do with gender equality. And the treatment of refugees has everything to do with gender equality.
Okay.
And the way that our health service is being treated has everything to do with gender equality. And the education service, all of this stuff has everything to do with gender equality because these are all issues that affect women right here and all around the world. And so I think it's kind of churlish. It's what I would call priorities trolling. It's like asking the Asthma Society why they don't do more about motor neurone disease. The fact is there are lots and lots of important issues. If she thinks something is more important than this, brilliant. She should get started in working on it. I'll be glad to sign her petition. I'll join her protest. I'll be all over it. But to sit there instead and pick a at somebody
let
else
Charlotte
for
get
what
a
they're
word in
talking about,
edgeways.
that's daft and churlish.
I mean, isn't that a fair point, Charlotte? That you know, you say that there are no women there, it's not really a problem, you don't really notice it, there are bigger and better things to focus about. But if there were women there, wouldn't that encourage more women to get into Parliament? Would a statue make a difference, do you think?
Well, as we've established, Caroline Criado-Perez, who's a very intelligent and politically astute woman, only noticed last week that there was the statue missing. So it just shows that not many people are paying attention in the first place. And, you know, on the other hand, you might say for men, do they feel inspired by the male statues there? But the fact is that a lot of people will be baffled by who some of them are. So I think it's a really simplistic argument to say that, oh, someone will see a statue going around Parliament Square and suddenly be inspired to follow their dreams. And if they don't have this statue, then we won't have gender inequality, which is just bizarrely reductionist and pedantic. And the fact is, you know, I understand what Kate's saying. You know, there are lots of little things that matter in the fight for feminism, but it's a massive energy drain. I mean, sure, you'll get a Guardian column if you want to do this sort of campaign, but why, you know, it's just such a waste of energy.
68,000 signatures, though, already, hasn't there been, Charlotte? Kate, do you think women deserve a statue in Parliament? Do you think we've actually done enough since we got the vote all those years ago? There's been one female Prime Minister, you know, only a third of MPs are women, around a third of the cabinet female. Have we tried hard enough? Do we deserve a spot?
Globally, women do something like 2/3 of the work. So the idea of that we have to do something special to earn a spot in Parliament Square, to earn, you know, one statue next to 11 statues of men. I mean, I sort of, to be honest, I find the question obnoxious and offensive. Like, what do women need to do to earn their place? You know, as if we somehow have to work harder than everybody else. Women fought
but the point of the statues in Parliament Square.
Let me finish. Women fought to the point of losing their lives, sacrificed their whole life to get women the vote. This is not. What else did you want? I mean, you know. I mean, if a woman was willing to sacrifice her entire life for this cause, I don't understand how much more she could have given. So have women done enough? Well, if a woman's whole life isn't enough to say that she deserves some recognition, to say that she deserves more recognition, for example, than George Canning, who, as we've established, was Prime Minister for a whole 4 months, then I think that's a daft question. The fact is, women around the world work incredibly hard in all sorts of fields, and they are almost consistently under-recognised for it and not given the credit that they deserve. And I think, you know, I think to even ask the question whether women deserve one statue out of a potential 12 in Parliament Square, well, it's just obnoxious. We deserve half the world because we are half the world, and that, you know, we do more than half the work, and we deserve to be recognised for all the stuff that we do, from the women right at the top. You've mentioned, of course, you know, we did have a female Prime Minister, but also the women right the way through the system, who are the people keeping this country going and doing the vast majority of the caring work and all other kinds of important stuff that goes on around our country, and running businesses and all this stuff. And the idea that we do all that hard work and somebody's going to sit there and ask whether we really deserve a whole statue, it makes me want to swear on air, and I shall not do so.
Well, please don't, and I'll try to be equally as obnoxious to Charlotte Gill. I mean, Charlotte, we know that sexism is still rife in all sorts of parts of society. In Westminster, you know, there have been stories in the news just in the last few weeks about MPs saying inappropriate things to female journalists. Wouldn't a female statue outside the Houses of Parliament perhaps act as perhaps a useful aide-memoire to some of the men in Parliament?
I mean, I just think, in terms of what Kate says, no one's denigrating women's achievements. No one's saying that they haven't done brilliant things. They're just saying, A, it's a statue. Aren't there more important things to worry about? And B, why now? Like, why is everyone upset about it now? You know, this statue, all of those 11 statues have been up for a while. It just seems like looking for something to complain about. And I do think we've got bigger fish to fry.
Right. Well, then there's something very important that you've missed there, Charlotte. There's something very, very important, because you say, why now, and why is this important? You know, and I hear this all the time about women's rights. Well, why are you focused on this one, and why have we got to worry about it now? Why can't this? You know, let's leave this kind of thing. Well, here's what you're misunderstanding. When we're campaigning for women's rights, they are rights. So we should never be asked which one to get first, and we should never be asked which one is more important than the other. They are rights. They are things that we are entitled to, and equal representation is something we are entitled to. It is a right. So So the right number of rights to have is all of them. And the right time to have them is right now, immediately, because that is what rights are. They're not a privilege, they're not a little extra, they're not a bonus, they're not a luxury, they're a right. So we should have all of them, and we should have them now. And if somebody's getting up and campaigning to change things and make things better and to give us our rights, then I think everybody should get on board with it. The idea of sitting on a TV show and saying, oh, I don't know why we can't focus on other things. Well, great, go home, focus on other things. I'm here, I want to get this one finished, and then I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And the last thing I need is you in my way, slowing me down so I can't get to the next thing. Let's do the thing that's right, and then let's move on and save the rest of the planet. Come on, let's do it together, Charlotte. I believe in you.
Come on, Charlotte, last thought to you.
Well, Kate, I mean, you're basically putting words in my mouth that I haven't said. Like, you're saying things like, I don't believe in women's rights because I think energy would be better invested elsewhere other than... Sorry, you've had your time. But I think the main problem, a lot of feminism focuses on societal messages. There's this big idea that statues are holding women back, that if they don't see the right thing, they're going to be suddenly reduced. And this victimises women, and this makes them feel more disempowered.
Being a victim of things victimises women.
But Charlotte, can I just ask you very briefly last? There isn't a statue of Thatcher in Parliament Square yet either. I mean, do you not think the first female Prime Minister, do you not think she should be marked in Parliament Square?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not as fussed about the statue as everyone else, so I haven't really given great thought to
Well, you're fussed enough to come on TV and argue about it.
Well, I don't.
It seems like the debate we're having is.
I don't see the great need for the statue.
No, Kate, let Charlotte finish.
Well, I don't see the great need for the statue, especially when no one has really noticed, at least not Caroline Criado-Perez, for a very long time that there was a women's statue missing. So I just can't see the impetus in going over this in great detail.
And finally, very briefly, Kate, there is a statue of Emmeline Pankhurst. The suffragettes are represented on the other side of Parliament in Victoria Square Gardens.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, I have a big problem with that. But the issue is that we've got two people here, and I think we should put a statue of a suffragette in Parliament Square. And Charlotte thinks that we sort of shouldn't bother because, it's just not that important. So when we're talking, it is not the case that Charlotte thinks we shouldn't have one because it would be awful and it would make the world a worse place. The fact is, some people aren't that bothered. That's fair enough. They're entitled to be not that bothered. What they're not really entitled to do is to tell me what I should or shouldn't be bothered about. As it happens, I think there's a great big list of things that would make life better and fairer for women in Britain. And Charlotte mentions, that nobody seems to have noticed.
Okay.
People walk past and no one's mentioned it. But isn't that the point, that you don't notice when women are absent from these things? You forget that this is how things have always worked, and actually it's not how things have to work in the future.
We're going to have
things
to leave
can
it
be better,
there.
and we should start with this.
Kate Smurthwaite and Charlotte Gill, thank you both very much. Are you bothered? Let us know your thoughts. I'm sure some of our viewers will have some thoughts on it. Keep your thoughts coming in at Jane Secker Sky.